In a rain-quiet English town, a girl in black waits by the church lychgate. Elias mistakes her stillness for the beginning of love. She is only keeping a vow. He follows her through candlelit doors and yew-dark paths, toward a cottage that remembers what people prefer to forget. Soon the bells will wake what the town buried: names, bones, and the cost of polite silence. This is a gothic love that unravels into conscience, a boy led by longing, a ghost led by justice, and a memorial garden that finally learns to speak. Follow the portraits that all wear one face, the river that keeps its secrets, and the soil that clings beneath his nails. Here, memory is the haunting, not monsters. Rain stitched the evening shut around St. Mary's, and the town wore its drizzle like a veil. Elias saw her where the lychgate makes a throat of stone, a woman in a black dress that seemed tailored by weather. She did not hold an umbrella. She did not shiver. She stood as if the hour itself had asked her to wait, and she, being obedient to hours, had obliged. When the wind turned the bell rope and the tower muttered once, she glanced up, and the motion revealed a face whose calm did not belong to the century that kept the shop tills counted and the buses punctual. He slowed, because loneliness slows for any figure that looks like an answer. "Are you all right?" was the sort of civility a small English town requires, but what he meant was, "I have been invisible for so long. Do you see me?" she said softly. "I am looking for someone." The sentence wore no urgency. It sounded like a craft, long practice, careful fingers, day after day, weaving names that never arrive. He saw her again the next evening, and the next. Each dusk, she grew more exactly placed, as if the lychgate were a compass, and she the needle. She did not cross the threshold. Her hands stayed folded, precise as a prayer that has learned not to beg. Elias stood with her, or near her, inventing errands that delayed him, reporting the small weather of his day, the bookshop where time arranged itself into tidy spines, customers who apologized for wanting anything. When she laughed, it was like a spoon tapped against the cooled rim of a teacup, a sound with manners. He asked for her name only after he had given away pieces of himself: the father who left, the mother who fell, the grave he avoided because grief in public felt like singing on a bus. "Clara," she said at last, and though the name was common as clay, it felt to him like a lost key pressed into his palm. Her hands were cold, the cold of water rather than air. Candlelight from the nave made her eyes carry small boats of gold that did not seem to dock. Oddness arrived as politely as the post. She never stepped onto church stone. She referred to the past with the grammar of memory rather than history. Once she looked through him as though he were mist and said, "Sometimes they are late. Sometimes they need reminding." When he dared to stand close enough to smell the mineral breath of wet stone around her, she looked mildly surprised, as if a portrait had noticed its viewer. The surprise delighted him. He mattered enough to move her stillness. They walked a little when the bells permitted, not far. 2 streets, a square with pigeons, the baker's shutters sugared with sleep. He told her the town pretended to remember him. She told him nothing except the weather and where to stand to hear the bells less sharply. He brought small offerings: a paper bag with a bun, a scarf folded like apology, a rosary found in a charity Bible. She took each as if gifts were a rite, and his hands, unasked, had learned the liturgy. The memorial garden behind the nave began to thicken with mist on the evenings he met her. Names on stone gathered dew as if language could sweat. Elias avoided one slab out of habit. The refusal had become a superstition. If he did not look, the loss would remain rumor. Clara's gaze, when it strayed gardenward, made the yew tremble. "Have you been waiting long?" he asked her once. "Long enough to learn patience by heart," she said. He wanted to invite her anywhere with light that was not ecclesiastical, some pub with a little good noise. But the idea of her among televisions and laughter felt like bringing a swan into a kitchen. She belonged to thresholds, to dampness, to the careful hour before lamps are turned on. He wondered, foolishly and beautifully, whether belonging could be borrowed. When he stepped again within arm's reach, she startled, not alarmed but awakened, as a candle knows a window has opened. The look rearranged him. He felt taller, as if a life could begin against a gate. "Shall we walk farther?" he said. "Soon," she answered, smiling with courtesy large enough to contain refusal. "Tomorrow you may come to where I belong." The sentence landed in him like a bell's last note, anechoic and then everywhere. "After the bells," she said, "it will be a nice night." He slept with the window cracked to listen to rain practice its signatures. Dawn showed him mud under his nails, and though no field had hosted him, he washed and said nothing to the mirror. Love, or its rehearsal, makes eccentricity look like a correct answer. He left early, tasted the day on his teeth and found it iron sweet, the way a coin warms to a palm. They departed at dusk, as if dismissed from a lesson. The lane surrendered to hedges, hedges to blackthorn, blackthorn to a path that expressed itself not by appearing ahead, but by assembling underfoot. The moon mislaid its appointment. "Few people come this way," Clara said, and the hedge agreed with a quietness of leaves. Elias kept half a pace behind, as if an invisible ribbon were tied to his ribs and she held the other end. It was not countryside so much as memory with bracken. Crosses leaned into ivy like drunk friends. Names had been licked blank by rain. The yews kept the air in their own custody. At last, the cottage surfaced where the trees made a keep. A single story, slate roof, a door that looked inward even when shut. Candles were already lit, the way a chapel remembers to breathe after the congregation has gone. No match had been struck in his hearing. Inside smelled of damp flint and something iron sweet, like a bruise trying to pronounce itself. The walls wore portraits, women in black. Different decades had appointed them different frames, but the eyes had been copied exactly, as if grief had commissioned its own uniform. Victorian pallor, a silvered photograph, a modern gloss. Each face was Clara's, or Clara's was each face, not lineage, but recurrence. Elias felt the floor correct its tilt and realized the tilt had been in him. "Who are they?" he asked, and hated the museum sound of the question. "Women who were promised and then left," she said. "Women who learned that waiting has a teeth mark. Women who took the mark and called it a door." She poured tea the color of a clock's inside. When he swallowed, the metal taste rang his bones. He set the cup down and could not remember having lifted it. He studied a canvas where the painter had hidden kneeling figures in the subject's pupils. Little silhouettes, elbow deep in soil, heads bowed, as if prayer were merely the first half of digging. A trick, he told himself. Pigments misbehave, eyes collect accidents. "Tell me the story of the man you wait for," he tried. aiming for lightness and striking glass. "He doesn't come anymore," she said without hurt, "but everyone comes, eventually." The window made a white sound, not quite lightning. The old flash of a camera bulb in a room won over. The cottage seemed to shuffle its weight to a more honest stance. Elias's certainty of where he had left his coat, his name, his promise to open the shop on time. Each item stepped away from him like a well-trained dog he had accidentally released. "I should go," he said cheerfully, which is how panic dresses in town clothes. "After," Clara said, "it will still be a nice night." When she kissed him, it was like being measured for an absence. The darkness did not fall. It was raised, as theater curtains are, to reveal the true scene. Portraits tilted infinitesimally to watch without admitting interest. He had the respectable sensation that he was helping with an old, necessary task whose name he would not be told until it was completed. Breath by breath, the room narrowed until it fit him exactly. He woke on wet grass with his mouth tasting of sod and the angel of the memorial garden pretending, for politeness, not to stare. The vicar's voice approached, made of wool and worry. "Good Lord, boy, are you hurt?" "The gates are locked at night." Elias's hands were a lesson in earth. His nails held a history that did not belong to his daylight. He looked at the nearest stone and read the name before ivy could intervene. Clara Whitmore, 1871 to 1893. The serif's certainty of it excused him from sense. Father Ambrose guided him inside, pressed tea upon him that tasted like the previous century's teaspoons. "You've gone pale," the vicar said kindly. "Do you know the name?" "I've spoken to her," Elias said, surprising himself with the calm of the statement. Ambrose's pause was curated. "There is a record," he allowed. "Tragic. We discourage the town from rehearsing certain griefs. It is an English mercy to keep quiet outside. The garden remembered how to be a garden. Inside, Elias sat with the taste of iron and the echo of kneeling figures bright in his mind like afterimage. He left before the vicar could bless him, because blessings sometimes feel like lids, and he needed sky. The path to the cottage had removed itself neatly, as a well-made bed erases the body. He found only hedges. The yews kept their secrets under their skirts. That night, sleep came like a kind dog, and then grew teeth. Clara stood within the memorial rails. Black dress poured over air, saying, "You're late," as if lateness were a sacrament, and he had missed his turn. He woke with the scent of turned soil braided into his hands and scrubbed until the skin stung. Beneath the soap, earth remained, patient as a promise. News moves through an English town with delicate boots. By noon, the radio at the bookshop was clearing its throat. Workmen had found remains in the memorial garden while mending a stubborn drainage pipe. Police tape garlanded the yews. A detective with hair combed like a good argument asked Father Ambrose for his time. The words, linked to disappearances, were spoken as if asking for change politely. Elias heard his heart in the till drawer, the bell, the hinge of the door. He walked to the church at dusk and stood with the others who stand when a place has begun to speak unexpectedly. The angel looked less tired now, as if an old sentence were finally allowed its verb. White-suited figures knelt with loving competence. The soil obligingly gave up what it had been forced to learn. Ambrose's face had the adhesive calm of a man who keeps a cup from emptying by not looking into it. In the puddle near the lychgate, two figures assembled, his and another beside it, the black of a dress that refuses to be revised by rain. He did not look up, because looking up would make the world explain itself, and explanations end stories before they're ready to close their eyes. "I can't find you," he told the water. "Not yet," the water said, water always being excellent at pronouns when ghosts are near. He went to the records office as if to fetch a cardigan, and instead retrieved a century. Ledgers breathed varnish and dust. The clerk, with a face shaped by hymns, placed the book as if it could bruise. Clara Whitmore, interred April 3rd, 1893. A note like a thorn. Found drowned near the old rectory well. Cause disputed. Rumors abound. The page afterward kept its hands clean. The columns that tracked the missing were less tidy. Names of men, outsiders mostly, vanished along the years like punctuation taken for economy. The town had forgiven itself by forgetting. Elias examined the forgetting and felt the way a cupboard feels when opened and asked to produce light. He walked to the river, which had the good manners to continue being a river. The wind smelled of pennies bracketed by prayers. "You found me," Clara said, and he understood that her mouth did not have to move any longer. She was past the tax of breath. "You were kind," she said, and he tasted the word the way a hand tastes a rope after climbing. "I was used," he answered, and found no injury in saying it. Kindness is work done for someone else's sentence. "What was done to you?" he asked, because mercy without knowledge curdles into pity. The black dress did not budge under the wind. "I said no," she said, and the sentence walked through the air like a woman carrying her own chair because no one else would. The rector's son had a key to everything and thought that meant me. He taught the village how to talk about me afterward, how to spell hunger as hysteria, how to choose the words that stagger a woman's name when she tries to cross a room. When he slipped and the well took him, they gave the water my face and called it tidy. The river tightened. "They seed I tempted," she continued, voice level as a ledger. "They said I lured. They said the poor are magnets for scandal and the dead should mind their manners. The priest who came after sipped quiet like a tonic. He taught the parish to store noise in the garden. Men who looked at absolution as permission came to him, and some of them never walked away from the shadow of the nave. Silence is a craft, and he practiced until it gilded him." Elias felt his stomach fold into careful shapes. Justice had been misfiled so many times the label had fallen off. "Why me?" he asked, not because he deserved an answer, but because questions are what breathing does when it wants to keep the room. "Because you listen to weather," she said. "Because you treat doorways as creatures. Because you were lonely enough to be porous. Because your hands would dig when asked and not require applause." He stood a long time there, the river extending its polite shiver, mist putting its cool hand on his head as if he were a fevered child and it, the aunt who knew remedies. When he finally turned, the town had acquired the eloquence of rumor. Windows were rehearsing curtains. A reporter practiced concern into a camera. Inside him, a hinge changed sides. Something old unclenched. The arrests came with English apologies. Father Ambrose gave statements until language went threadbare. The priest before him, long retired, longer protected, found himself spoken of in daylight, and the descriptions did not recognize his reflection. Names of men budded in the papers like late flowers. A curate who tithed in secrets. a farrier with a second ledger tucked inside a hymn book, a salesman of small Bibles who mistook a church door for a lock that would improve his conscience. The garden, patient stenographer, read its notes back. Elias returned at dusk. The memorial angels looked newly unknotted. He pressed his palm to the nave and felt the day's heat in the stone, as if the building had decided to remember aloud. In puddles and window panes he saw Clara, not apparition, but punctuation, the mark that keeps a sentence from ending where it's told. He wanted to be righteous for her, but righteousness is a theater that favors whoever shouts, so he chose accuracy. The rector's son with his inherited keys, villagers pulling a boy from a well and pushing a woman in to tidy the evening. Teacups, meetings, and the slow decision to file Clara under bad story and then under don't mention. It is easy to love an idea of a ghost, harder to look at what educated her. Clara did not ask for revenge, she asked for biography. In a dream, she sat by a window, dress pooling as if cloth remembered gravity better than flesh. "Tell it whole," she said. "Say I was clever with a needle, that I laughed rarely and for cause, that I read aloud without losing the room. Say I said no, and that trembling is not a verdict. Say I loved pears softening on a shelf and the river where it narrows. Say I believed the bells could inventory a town's decency, if someone listened." He walked the route to the cottage, because love instructs the feet even when the head knows the path is a courtesy that will not be extended twice. Hedges pretended not to understand. The yews kept their arithmetic, yet sometimes, at the right hour, his breath arranged itself as if a room were opening its eyes. He heard portraits tilt a fraction, cups cooling, women who had been told to wait, discovering the mathematics of thresholds. When the town asked, he aimed sentences. The dead had used him for something gentler than vengeance and sharper than a sermon, a correction in the right margin. The garden was a ledger at last brought to balance. Clara was not a curse, but the place's conscience. People nodded. Some inspected their boots as if leather had spoken impolitely. At night, when sleep misbuttoned itself, clay pressed its cool lips to his fingers. Earth asked to be unlearned. The river mended itself around moonlight. The bells rehearsed and then withheld their last note the way old grief does when it wants to stay. His room borrowed the temperature of his grandmother's scullery and the scent of pears, though pears were nowhere. He understood that righteous memory is its own kind of haunting, one that refuses theater. He read parish minutes that smelled of coal, phrases that did not blush but should have, moral housekeeping, safeguarding the flock, a need to limit access after dark, accepting gentlemen of reputation. In one margin, a fingerprint in candle grease beside a vote to move the rectory well's stone lip inward for aesthetics, an inward edge that would make a fall quieter. He walked with Ambrose along the low wall where the churchyard lowers its voice. "I knew the cupboard's shape before I opened it," the vicar said. "I told myself a parish needs quiet, like lungs need rhythm. I was wrong. Rhythm is not quiet, it is motion." Elias did not enjoy his repentance on his face. The kindest thing was to let the man keep some privacy. Clara's name began to be said at ordinary speed in ordinary rooms. A girl at the greengrocer corrected someone who called her that ghost. "Her name is Clara," she said, making the syllables a lit match. The old woman with pigeons left a pair on the memorial wall. the practiced aim of someone who had been waiting to be asked to remember. He did not see Clara for a while, which is to say, he saw her correctly, as rearranged quiet rather than spectacle. The town, having been excited by crisis, returned to the leisure of decorum. Reporters migrated to newer nouns. The garden became greenly ordinary, a sentence whose commas had been polished. Ambrose learned to be a door that opens without creak. He spoke more names aloud than the register used to allow. Elias kept the lychgate company because the body stays with its first plan. Nights were practical, wood smoke ironing the air, hedges rehearsing themselves, puddles keeping neat copies of the sky. He placed his palm on stone. "I can't find you," he would say. The stone, trained in liturgy, answered, "Good," not as punishment, only because love that hardens into hunting becomes its own crime. She stood beside him again without theater. The dress kept its dark, the face kept its patience. "Will you go?" he asked, juvenile against the weather. "I am gone," she said gently, "and I remain. I am a pattern the town makes when it forgets to be kind. The pattern is simpler now. That is enough." He nodded and paid the small coin that such nods cost. "What do I owe?" "Owe the living," she said. "Owe them the truth about what they inherit. If refusal is misnamed, correct the name. If silence is kept like silver, value it less. If the garden is asked to swallow speech, burn incense there and practice saying it anyway. Leave pears to bruise without shame. Let the river tell you what the bells cannot." He laughed, small, clean, at the joke the story had told. A boy who thought he needed love was requisitioned for its maintenance. He had unearthed a killer by allowing himself to be used for a sentence older than himself. Not romance, but gospel enough for a town without a saint. Dusk turned, and for a breath, the path existed. Candles already lit, portraits watching with competent affection, cups arranged for a company that has learned to make room without apology. The ribbon in his ribs tugged once and slackened. "You were never evil," he said, and the air received it and amended its weather. He took to carrying a small trowel, not to dig, but because people lose things they should not have been asked to carry. Rings went back to ground, notes went back to doors. In the square, when a stranger's voice faltered around the word "no," he stood until the sentence stayed whole. He sent pears to Ambrose's kitchen and smelled them ripening during evening prayer. Some nights, those when bells are almost brave, he woke with a faint taste of soil and the conviction that somewhere behind arithmetic, a cottage waited with portraits tilted to the correct tenderness. He listened until the room remembered itself. Outside, the town practiced kindness, which is a difficult instrument, but progress was audible. The lychgate kept its throat. Spring arrived with its unsleeping errands. The square hosted a shy market. Children carried almonds and left comets of sugar. The town had not become innocent, only useful. Elias wrote an unsigned letter to the paper. When someone refuses, believe them sooner than is comfortable. When an institution asks for quiet, ask what it plans to hide. When a story begins at a gate in the rain, look to the garden for its ending. Fold pears into your cakes even if they bruise. Offer your tools before asking what they will uncover. If you see a woman by the lychgate in a dress that argues with the weather, do not tidy her into the church. Stand at the edge where thresholds do their mathematics. Say her name properly. Practice not owning what you love. Then go home and open your window. so the rain can practice its language on your sill and remind you the world remains fluent in what we try to forget.